Hello.
Hello.
This is not the recording that is deleted.
No, that's gone forever.
That's gone. It wasn't bad. It was bad.
It was bad.
It was,
There is a bunch of interested people. I didn't tell you this.
oh,
I did get some comments about the shirt
what shirt?
that I'm going to make you.
Oh
People
God.
are very interested in that shirt.
I'm interested in this
Might be a
shirt.
Christmas present. The one that says "fun" with a big line through it, or "F your fun." It's a toss up.
I like that.
Well, maybe you'll get lucky if you're good. If you're good, you'll get a Christmas present.
I don't want one.
So.
All right.
So you put up this week a post, something you've been. This is interesting because in presenting it, it's kind of alludes to like what the actual topic is as well of the post. You put up a post talking about something that I think was like really great. Ironically, you were working on that post for a long time. You had this information for a long time, and you finally put it out there. So, what was the post this week that we're going to be talking about today?
Application versus acquisition as it relates to learning and balancing knowing and doing, or learning and doing. So it's about learning and how, especially in today with access to information, I mean, it's information overload. We've talked about that. Everyone's busy, or the perception of being busy. I think we're turning the ship slowly as it like, hey, it is not like a badge of honor.
Right.
But nonetheless, you ask people how they're doing, busy. And it's like, okay, give me a real answer.
Right.
So there's tons of opportunity to learn. And it seems like all people are doing is doing. Mm-hmm. But something is amiss. We're depressed, we're unsatisfied at work, job satisfaction is down, relationships are down, we have obesity crisis. Like, it's not working.
Right. Something's broken.
Something is broken.
Okay.
And so, yeah, I don't know. It was about 2 years ago that I was really working through this. And I forget, it was somebody I was working with, I think. Anyway. And yeah, kind of was like, okay, well, I think that there's a better way to conceptualize this and visualize this to then make progress and move forward versus saying, oh, yeah, you just need to go to this course, or oh, you just need to learn more, or oh, you need to execute more.
Right.
Like there's somewhere in between that, and that's the role of a coach.
So you identify these like three categories, and as it relates, I mean, we can talk about the three categories, and then we can talk about what those look like in real life application of like quote unquote learning. So what are the three categories we talked about?
So characters, I would say, or archetypes.
Sure.
There's the hoarder, there's the old guard, and there's the student.
Okay.
And the hoarder, if you guys haven't actually seen the thing, go on to Instagram.
Yeah, the visual graphic is helpful.
And it's up there. So yeah, anyway. So the hoarder acquires so much more information than they actually apply.
Okay.
So for visual purposes of the graph, it looked like a pie chart with 90% of it being acquisition.
Okay.
10% of it, this little tiny pizza pie slice, being application.
Got it.
That's the hoarder. The old guard applies 90% of what they've always applied and only really takes in or acquires maybe 10% of new information.
Okay.
If that, really. The old guard's probably more like 1%, but either way. What? What are you giving me that face for?
Nothing.
Did I hit a nerve?
Well, I identify as the old guard, and I feel like 1%. That's a bit harsh. But anyway, okay, so that's the old guard.
Age is just a number, Cannibal. And then there's the student. And, for the student's kind of 50-50. The student is actively seeking out new information and acquiring new information, but is also applying that information. And I always tell people, like, students take tests. They don't just study. You're not a student if you just study. You have to you take tests, and part of that is the application, is stepping up, is acting, is kind of going into the unknown. And so having a student mindset is, I think, something that we can all understand and be like, oh yeah, students. But like, okay, but what is it really about a student if we look at that? It's not just being nose in the books. That's
right.
possibly the hoarder.
Right.
So, yeah, that's, I think.
So, I mean, when you say learning, like, it's easy to think about like acquisition and application. It's easy to think about that if you're really talking about, like, okay, for example, in our line of work, if you're just learning about the body, fitness, all this stuff, but you're not actually applying it to yourself, the gym, you're just taking courses, reading books. Okay.
Yeah.
But, like, is that, when you talk about acquiring, what other things, like, in people's lives, like, what are tangible examples of, like, for people that are listening, like, not just thinking in terms of, like, reading books and taking courses, but just life
right.
in
So
general.
it's not necessarily learning formalized education.
Right.
It's really about acquiring information, and we are in the information age, and information, not just like what the whole Facebook and data stuff, like, not just that, but like what's so and so doing, like the social media influence on acquiring information. And there's some really odd, like, you can curate your social media to learn a tremendous amount, and you can also curate it to be absolutely paralyzing. And I think that's one of the things that we see. So acquiring information, just like the openness to either sensory or data point endpoints to receive. Yeah.
So even, like, would you take it as far as to say in, like, a relationship, like, just to try to, before we get into them, expand, like, so people really can apply it to everything. Like, that could also be if you are the old guard in your relationship, like that, or with yourself, like, that's just how I am. That's just how things are. Like, I'm not really interested in even acquiring anything to progress further. Like, hey, that's just how I am. Like, that's just what I do.
Yeah.
Versus someone on the flip side who's always trying to change themselves or do something different, but they're not really actually then trying to. Yeah. So
I think there's a frequency with knowing yourself. And so frequencies, ups and downs. The flat line is death.
Yeah.
Right. And everybody's seen that on, like, Grey's Anatomy or whatever those shows are. Like, flat line is death. We know that. Frequency, crazy high, like earthquake frequency. Yeah. You don't know yourself either.
Yeah.
So I think there's a frequency when it comes to knowing yourself. And to also recognize, like, you will change. If you don't change, you are dead. That is the biggest thing. Maybe not physically now, but, like, you might as well be, and it's coming pretty quick. If you never change, that's not how life, that's not life.
And you think that's more like the old guard?
I think somebody that says, hey, this is how I am.
Yeah.
Is, for whatever reason,
right,
buying into the belief, which is a limiting belief, that they are never going to change.
They can't acquire new information to change themselves. It's just...
Right. Like, this is who I am, accept me, or pound sand.
Right.
So it's like, okay, if you were to be able to then look at that and be like, yeah, I'm definitely being the old guard. Like, oof.
Right.
So them saying that is their belief and it's their truth. I don't think it has to be that way. And I think it approaches that, or the failure to approach that as yourself being somebody who can change and you can get to know yourself or find yourself or reintroduce yourself. That's exciting and that's invigorating. However, for many people that ignore themselves for so long, the thought of change, a
It's
tiny little
overwhelming.
change,
Yeah.
is overwhelming. And if it's like a still pond and you throw a little pebble in it, like there's going to have the ripple effect. And for somebody who has ignored themselves, not looked within themselves, lived by someone else's templates, and has kind of fit into this mold, which has also been sort of successful, if they've, I'm sure, successful people. And it's like, now you have to change. It's like, that means literally my entire life.
Right,
and
disrupting
It's like, and it's
things.
like, yes, you are correct. Yeah.
So when we look at these archetypes, like, and someone who does want to change, and we talked about like the analogy of kind of how you can apply it that makes it, as you said, like personalizing it.
Yeah.
So can you talk a little bit about like that process, or why it's good that this is like not having it be this thing you do?
Yeah, I think that there's obviously value, and you have to know yourself.
Mm-hmm.
One of the kind of pitfalls with that, though, is when we really persecute ourselves with the information, and it's that information is not like there to be
Information
sentence.
about identifying yourself.
Yeah, your
like,
awareness.
Hey, I identify as an old guard.
Yeah.
So you're saying like it's really not helpful for me to just be like, ugh, like I can't believe it. Like, oh my gosh, when I read that, like what a horrible, wow, I'm really that close-minded and I really don't this and that, and like that's not getting me anywhere. Just identifying it.
Yes. The archetype, and generally speaking, people want to be the student.
Of course. That's like the golden.
Yeah, that's ideal, because that's whatever. But even within that, so the old guard and the hoarder, they're not diagnoses. Like you're not. It's not like, hey,
a sentence, as you said.
Right. It's not a sentence. It's a way to raise your awareness, so that you can see maybe where you have been up to this point,
or where you tend to trend.
Everybody has a bias. Everybody kind of defaults to one thing or the other in everything.
Yeah.
That's traits, and that's human nature. So by raising our awareness to see like, okay, this might either be where I either default to, find more comfortable. Yep, I know, like I struggle with, a plot application. That's fine. It's there to be used, not to be used against you. Like that's the whole point.
It's to
with
cultivate awareness.
Yeah.
Not to be.
And then to drive that action forward of like, okay, for example, I probably am more of the hoarder.
Right.
I would like to be more of the student. Okay. I need to apply more of what I'm learning more. So it's not just like, hey, don't learn anymore. Because like I do consider myself a student also. But that could be too far. Like, hey, take the test. Like, raise your hand. Like, validate your learning. If you fail, great. It's a roadmap
now you know
to
where
learn.
To go back and learn more. Right.
So, it's by looking at these archetypes and these characters, we can personalize some traits or some behaviors, but not make it who you are necessarily as a person. But it gives a little bit of distance. Because instead of saying like, ugh, I am the old guard, I am stale, I'm stagnant, and then you just start jumping off the judgment cliff. And that's not the point of this. It's to be like, okay, cool, this is where I am, snapshot. This is kind of where I want to go. And look, did the numbers matter? Did the pie charts? No. It's not about that.
Yeah. So, so when we're looking at that, and one of the things you said, I think it was probably in my training when you were coaching me, you talked about being a Green Beret. And when you were in the training process to lead up to the selection to become a Green Beret, you talked about like how you had to go about like acting as if you were that identity already. So when we now look at these archetypes, it's really important, I think you said, to kind of identify with like, if I'm the old guard, how would I, if I want to be more of a student,
Mm-hmm.
so to look at that and say like, okay, I want to be a student. How would a student be right now? So it helps people like kind of identify with like, what would a student do?
Right.
And so that I think is a really good thing for people to, take on that. Just like, we said the difference of someone who maybe is obese.
Yeah.
Saying there's a difference between saying I have to lose 100 pounds.
Yeah.
Or I want to be the person that is healthy.
Right.
And so that gets into sort of a little bit like, well, yeah, the how and the actions and like what does that person do? Would you agree?
I would, and I think that's definitely a big influence on why I came up with these because I had absolutely no business becoming a Green Beret. Just like that was the reality. Like, and there was people who voiced that to me.
Sure.
And okay, but I'm gonna try. Like, is it possible? There's this enlistment contract. There's this option. Here's the minimum criteria. I get it. Minimum criteria. You hit the minimums, you're done. Right. But nonetheless, like, it is possible. It's not like saying, hey, you can only, what is it? Do you have to be over 40 to be the president or something? Or whatever. Or like, hey, you have to be born in the U.S.
Right.
And it's just like, sorry, like, you don't qualify. Sure. Like, no. So, for me, I knew, as a result of also, like, being a very high-level athlete, that it's too late come game day to perform. Mm-hmm. It is way too late. And so that person that you are, or that you want to be, you do have to be.
Right. Early. You have to start that process much earlier on.
Early.
Embracing that.
Yeah. And it's like, you might not know exactly. I had no idea what a real Green Beret, like, would do in that scenario. Yeah. But I did have an understanding. I did enough research. I was professional enough to know, okay, I'm going to learn about the Green Berets from the information I have available. And again, we are in a time where information is readily available. Mm-hmm. And when I was going through it, there was no Instagram. Mm-hmm. Now it's just like, it's way too far the other end. Yeah. Anyway, so, okay, I'm going to be professional. This is important to me, so I'm going to educate myself to the best I can. Mm-hmm. And come up with this narrative, this story, this movie about what this character does, and that's going to be me. And like, it's not being a fake, it's not being a phony, it's not, the act as if thing. I understand the reason for saying like, hey, act as if, but it's more than that.
Sure, it's not just empty actions. What's I think funny is like that was probably a time where you were really a student because you were learning, but you were applying it.
Without a doubt. Yeah. Without a doubt. And I would say, the balances and the scales of life are always changing. So when I was in that period, there was definitely like a frequency that felt right. Yeah. There was also some significant absences in life. Sure.
But I think there's also, so that's the other thing that I think in different parts of people's lives, they might identify with or trend towards one or the other.
I would say that, just to not to cut you off, you are not one of those in everything. Sure. You are the hoarder in some things, you are the old guard in others, and you are the student in other things. And if you are not, you're not looking hard enough.
Yeah, and I think it's an interesting, we talked last week about the gym and sort of the process with that, and you and I tend to be, generally speaking, on different ends. Like, I do tend to be the old guard, you tend to be the hoarder. Yeah. So even we talked about the process of me learning more. Yeah. Yeah, and that's something, the learning and talking about where people are currently. I think there is a difference, though, between, and this is something that's come up, like the memorizing versus learning. Yeah. Yeah. So going to, and we'll use the gym as an example because that's relevant. Going to the gym and going through the motions doesn't mean you're actually learning. No. And it also doesn't mean you may be applying it. So like really learning is really acquiring new information and having to work at it. There is work there. It's not really just a passive process.
No, it's not just an intake.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then the application, yeah, it is also challenging, and will probably result in maybe a couple times of failure if we're talking about like maybe the gym or
yeah.
And that is, I think, why it's much people trend towards just being passive in it. Like,
yeah,
this is what I've done, this is what I do. To start taking that chunk of, and speaking from experience of like, you know, that small little piece of application and starting to apply more is scary because, yeah, you're not gonna just crush it like right away. There's gonna be a little bit of failure in that, or learning, and like, now I know. So for me, for example, what happens once you start to know more? Like, now I'm learning more, and then there's this like, now you're in a position where like, ugh, now I know. I can't unknow that.
Yeah.
Now I kind of like have to start applying that, and that's gonna rock the boat. And like, so it's definitely
blue pill
not
or red
as
pill.
right. It's not as easy as just saying like, oh, okay, like I'll just like learn more.
None of that shit's easy. Like that's you know, like, no, it's not like, oh, I'm just gonna learn more, and it is not cut and dry. I was at a training active life seminar 2 weeks ago, and part of that is like they have like lectures and theory, but then they also have assessments. Like, so, you know,
like physical assessments.
Like physical assessments to identify range of motion. And I have no background in athletic training, like, you know, taped ankles and, you know, basically like keeping athletes together. Although I have the absolute most respect and admiration for them, because my senior year of college, they literally kept me together. It was amazing what they did. Anyway, and I'm not a physical therapist, obviously.
Right.
So like, working with patients, I've never called somebody a patient, but like, honestly, actually I have, but in this regard. Okay, here we go. Rewind. See, this is the cut footage stuff. What I'm trying to say is, it was the first time I was ever running somebody through a physical screening assessment.
Okay.
All right. And so you have the manual, and you have the points of performance, and you have the exact verbiage you have to say, and what you're looking for, what a good thing, what a not so good thing, what a bad thing is. All right. So you have all the criteria.
Got it.
Like, right. Okay. They show us. Now there's, 30 people in the room, and it's taped off and very professional. And they're like, all right, here's how you do it. Listen to what I say. Watch what I do. Roger. All right. Break out. Now practice on each other. You're going to have 90 seconds. And we're going to rotate. So you're going to get like 7 or 8 reps. Okay. Like, right on. Took my notebook and pad. Put that down, because like, I need my hands.
Have to work with people.
And it's like, all right, Jim. Like, this is what we're gonna do. You're gonna stand with your feet, confident, and run through the assessment. I don't think it was perfect. In fact, I know it wasn't. I hope it wasn't perfect.
Right.
But there was no cheat sheet. Mm-hmm. And I'm not saying this to say like, look how great I am. I'm saying this because what happened the next day was very funny. One of the participants, and anyway, we did this like 3 or 4 times throughout day 1. One of the participants the next day was like, hey, I didn't know, like, you're one of the owners here. I was like, yeah, like my wife and I own it or whatever, but like, this is what this is about. We're just providing the space. And he's like, yeah, I gotta be honest, when I saw you come up to me with your note, without any notes, I was like, who the fuck is this guy? Like, who does he think he is? Like, without any notes. And I was like, that's really interesting. Mm-hmm. That was so interesting to me, because it's like, I have 8 iterations to learn this thing. Mm-hmm. The purpose I am here is to learn this.
Right.
It is not to treat your range of motion. This is not about you. This is about my learning experience right now. So I can use those 8 iterations for this one test to recite what's on the paper and read. I know how to read.
Sure. Or
I can screw up on you. I can get a little bit better on Nance. I can get a touch better on Sally. I'm gonna botch Jim, but when I get to Mike, I'm gonna put it all together. Right. And like that's the thing. And I said to him like, oh, I'm like, yeah, it's funny. I'm like, I have some past experiences where like there's no notes. There's
Right.
no like, hey,
As
what is
soon
this?
as you
Like,
have the cheat sheet and the notes, it's just part of you're not in the position of that.
so they're
You haven't
showing
taken the
people,
risk
they're
of having to
showing
learn.
people what to do,
Yes.
and I'm looking around, and everybody's heads down, writing down. Like
Mm-hmm.
you are missing the purpose. You're missing the value. You're seeing somebody who has done this possibly millions of times. You're missing them work for what? Your notes that are
Sure.
like you can't capture
Yeah.
what you're seeing. So part of that is I don't know why we got down on that,
I'm
but
not sure
but
why
part
we
of
got
that
down on that.
was
Learning.
and if you're like you
Not
going to the
memorizing.
gym, not memorizing,
Yes.
right? So if you go to whatever and it's just like I need to memorize this, it's like no, you need to learn it.
Yeah, and that is, I mean, you can look at that in the simplest things. You can take a ride in the passenger seat of the car until you're driving the car yourself. So,
Yeah.
that's the thing. And so looking at your life and where you're kind of going through the motions that might look like learning, but are not actually learning. And only you can really know if you're actually learning or just memorizing. So, as it relates to the gym is what we were talking about. Being excited about it not being I guess what I like about the student is there's like an excitement and in both learning and application.
Yeah.
And there's not this like imbalance, like, you know, and everybody probably has that with one or the other, a little bit of like, I have to like apply this or I have to like learn more. So really, because if you're not invested in that process, like it also doesn't work. You can't just be like, oh, I want to be perfect. I want to be the student. So I have to do this. Like you have to actually want to create that balance.
Yeah.
So one of the things I was thinking about when we were looking at this and like in your newsletter, you talked about, okay, so like you've identified one of these archetypes, maybe something you relate to. Okay. I think people get stuck in like, well, why? Why am I like, so now instead of focusing on maybe the action steps and like, I want to become a student, people get stuck in like, well, why am I an old guard? Like, what is that about me? And a little bit of the, putting a sentence on yourself and judging yourself. But I thought it was interesting to think about like what between the ears is and what it isn't. So, some people will identify, well, is it like therapy? Is it like this? Is it like that? And I think it's a conversation we've had before where a lot of people, therapy gets stuck in like the why, and like, why did this happen? And let's go back. And so I'm going to look back and figure out what happened that made me identify with old guard. And that's not really what you care about.
No.
So
that certainly has its value.
Sure.
I'm not qualified for that.
Right.
I don't claim to be a therapist. And that's not what I'm interested. Like that's not my skill set.
So for this, like, what is taking it forward? Like, so that will take me, for example, if I'm working with you and we have worked on this, like how do you help somebody? How do you help coach somebody who, because not everybody, we all, that's part of between the ears is having a coach to help. Now I've identified I'm the old guard. Cool. I need to identify more as a student, and that for me that means learning more.
Mm-hmm.
Great, I know that. The problem or where people get stuck is like, okay, what action steps, what does that look like to become a student? So how do you see the coaching or what your role is in like getting people there?
Well, first I think it's important to say I'm not going to tell you the fucking answers because I don't have them. It's funny, the other night I was talking with James Victoria, now like a friend of mine or whatever.
Yeah.
And we were he's a brilliant artist. And he was saying how one of the things he likes about what I'm doing is it resonates with him in that he's not the answers guy. People think he is. And he's been a teacher. He was a teacher at some art school. But he's in like the Museum of Modern Art. Like
Right.
The dude is a stud. But yeah, he's not the teacher guy. Like
But does a teacher really, even though the teacher might
what I mean
have
is,
a lot of knowledge,
I'm sorry,
they don't
what
tell
I mean,
that's not helping
I'm sorry, I
people.
misspoke.
Yeah.
What I meant is he's not the answers guy.
Yeah,
He's a teacher. And a teacher doesn't just tell you the answers.
Right.
They partner with you. They provide you. So that's a big thing with me and between the ears. So there's like multiple hats that I wear. Teacher. If somebody doesn't understand how things work, and I think that I can help them, yeah, I'm going to teach you a couple things. And that's just
providing them with some knowledge and information, and
the coach part, which I'm very passionate about, which I think I'm very good at, is being able to partner with people to provide guidance and nudges to have them look within and find answers and make them theirs. Because your answer is always going to be stronger than my answer.
Right.
Even if I'm in the role of teacher, coach, whatever, mentor.
Right. And then, and one of the things that helped me kind of make that identification, like that distinction, is the difference between a coach and a consultant.
Yeah.
So then a consultant is going to literally tell you like the answer.
I feel like this is a flip side to the archetypes. It's like the coach, consultant, like that would be an interesting thing to break out. Maybe we do that for people.
Maybe you can release it
3 years from now.
So, but I mean, I think it's important for people to understand a little bit of like, how would Bill help me with this stuff, and
so I would say that there's three. Then let's just go with 3 archetypes, and these are usually what the 3 are in the coaching community. And like I know this because I've taken like extensive courses on it, and I've actually had coaches and mentors and this and that. But generally speaking, within the helping profession, there are 3 major archetypes that coaches or the role presents. Yeah. There's a coach, there's a consultant, and then there's a mentor. And those are very different. Now, every like coaching body or approach to coaching, because that's really all of them, they have different approaches, different definitions. They're going to have a different spin on them all. And so I have like what's been mine has been like a mentor is going to kind of be like, hey, this is what I do. Shadow me.
Right. Watch me.
And you can kind of be like me a little bit. Yeah. And I've called people like Nate, like he's a mentor to me.
Sure. Like what would Nate do? You
I've thought about that all the time. Mike, mentor.
Yeah.
You know, and they're mentors for different reasons, but it was never like, it wasn't like, they weren't like egotistical with it, but they were saying like,
there are people that have been there, done it. They have attributes that you respect, and it's like, okay.
And here's the key thing with a mentor. They might not know they're being a mentor.
Right.
So there's that is a huge element. Like I can view so-and-so as a mentor.
Without them being part of that
and process. Never tell them. Because it might be like as soon as I tell them then change.
Then they start wondering, is this...
Right, okay? And then they have to change. It's like, no, you just need to be you.
Got it.
And it's like, oh God, how do I do that?
Okay.
You know, so you can select a mentor without telling that person a mentor. But it's very much like a under my wing, kind of like that. All right. There's the consultant. And the consultant is somebody who has a given set of experience, skills, and answers to a problem that you want fixing. So like they're going to tell you what to do because they know, generally speaking, with like a very high rate of assurance.
And a very specific skill set.
And a specific skill set. Yeah. A lot of quote unquote coaches are poor consultants, are really bad consultants because they also just tell them what they would do. And you're not helping anybody.
They're not necessarily a bad consultant, they're a bad coach because they're just leaning on consulting. So like
they're not a coach.
Right.
They're not a coach. They're a bad consultant because like the consultant knows that if you come to me for consulting in, let's just say it's the gym, right? Or I come to you because you're that. Yeah.
You're coming to me.
I'm coming to you. Okay.
How dare you?
I just turned around and left. I come to you and I'm like, hey, I want consulting on starting a gym. I've got a gym and it's going to be invite only. I'm going to reject 99% of the people that apply because of whatever. But like, I want to know systems and blah, 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 blah. You telling me, well, I would accept everybody in. Like, don't, what? An invite only gym? Like,
Right.
that's ridiculous. That's not a coach.
Yep.
That's a bad consultant because you're opining on a belief structure that is you.
Right.
I didn't ask your opinion. I asked for your expertise after, over a decade of experience owning a business. So like, for example, equipment, coaching, scheduling, like those are very objective, non-personal pieces of information.
They're not theory, they're not.
No, it's not like, hey, what would you do here?
Right.
Now
if you came and said, I'm not sure which model, I want to make this much money, I want this and this and this, I'm thinking of either letting everybody in or having it very select, that person could say, well, based on what you're saying and what you want to do and what you're looking to do, in my experience, this is a little more limiting in how many people you get and if you don't know people, and this is more. So you can have that, but you're not judging what their beliefs
If I came to you and said, let's just say this, I'm Jim Jones. Back in the day, Jim Jones had a sign on the door that basically said, like, fuck off, we're not interested in you. And was wildly successful.
Right.
So going to a consultant and that consultant saying, no, bad, like, don't do that.
Yeah.
It's like, but it's working.
Right.
So get out of the way. I'm not interested in your opinions. I'm interested in the real knowledge that you have about this subject matter. Yeah. So, of course, a consultant can say, look, based on these basically objective, non-personal, like very like emotionally neutral facts or experiences, this is what my opinion is. Sure. And then there's multiple ones. Right.
So
that's a bit in the weeds. A lot of times people that are acting or calling themselves a coach are poorly consulting because they are telling someone what to do, providing the answer, which a consultant does. However, not because of what is like not theirs, but their own personal thing.
Okay, right. So a coach is partnering with the person to have that person, find those answers for themselves.
A coach partners with whomever they're working with to really, one, get to know who they're working with, to fully understand them, so that they can provide guidance, accountability, objectiveness, and help facilitate that person's true discovery, and hold them accountable for follow through and challenge them where needed. So, that's the big thing. It's like, if anybody's seen sports, they'll know, like, coaches aren't on the goddamn field. And there's a reason for that. When I finished college, when I finished my senior year, I went on to coach as an assistant coach the next season and coached, there for 3 or 4 years. I guess two or 3 years, doesn't matter. Seasons. And I was like, ugh, like I was getting frustrated. One, I was kind of frustrated because like I still wanted to play. I was like, sure, we were good and all of that. And Chez was like, listen, like I hear you. And I was like full of piss and vinegar. And I literally these guys were my teammates.
Yeah.
So I had a much different relationship with them when we were wearing the same jersey. Sure. Like I could kind of, versus being in the coaching role now. And I was like, probably venting to Chez or whatever. Like, I don't understand. Why can't they just, blah, blah, blah. And he's like, look, I learned this super, like, the hard way. You can't coach people. You can't coach yourself out there. And I think I've talked about this before. And then fast forward 10 years, we're in the Middle East, and Nate and I are, like, just going down a rabbit hole one night and talking about leadership. And it's like, Nate, you can't lead people the way you would want to be led, or the way that a good leader leads you. Yeah. Because it's not about you. And as a coach, that's the biggest thing. Like, it is not about you. Yeah. And it is very hard to have the essence of a coach. It is hard. If you've never had a coach before, it is incredibly hard. And the path to becoming a better coach now, like, yeah,
Yeah.
You're going to make a lot of mistakes. You're going to learn. But if you don't have that student mindset, you're doomed. You're just going to be probably the old guard. You're probably going to fall into that because you also don't quite know where do I look or whatever. And there's a million resources out there. That said, and I see this all the time within the coaching profession, and some of the foundations or the federations or whatever, it's just unsatiable consumption of the next best thing and the latest and greatest.
Right. Which is more.
So I'm in a couple groups with coaches around the world, and this isn't said to be judgmental, but like some of the questions that are posed there, I'm like, oh my God, that's like, just turn in your credential right now, because if you're asking that question, you don't understand the role of a coach, and maybe whatever, but like
sure. But that also, right? So to kind of bring it back to, we were talking about, like, so that is, well, what's interesting about that is, there's being a coach. It's also not just like, oh, I'm gonna read this book, or I'm gonna, if I read this or learn that, like, that's gonna solve it. It's a very delicate balance, as you're saying, of like really, really acquiring the information and then applying it and learning through that.
Yeah.
So when you talking about people who might be interested in, like, okay, so I've identified this and now I'd like to make progress. Like, that is really what between the ears, that's what you do with coaching. The practice has that. And I think it is interesting for a lot of people in the, as you said, the age we're in, where it's like instant gratification, just like, I'm busy, I don't have time to figure this out for myself. I just want you to tell me. And that's, I think, where people can benefit from this in just their whole life and their whole, like, state. Like, if we stop for a second and say, like, what am I really saying? Like, I'm really saying that I don't even have time to make that change for myself. I'm too busy, that I just want someone else to come in and, like, fill in.
And what's funny about that is, like, one, if that's what you say, then I would say, like, sorry, I cannot provide what you're looking for, and I have no problem having that.
But you've kind of identified for that person, like,
well,
that's where you're stuck. That's where you're stuck.
Yeah, and it gets the thing, like, you want the answer because you want to be the person that has that answer. But you have not done...
You've missed the process.
You've missed the process, and you have not become that person.
Right.
Like,
yes,
you can go buy the green beret in the damn commissary or the shopette and get it sewn up. And stolen valor, I mean, there's a million people out there pretending to be that. You can do that.
Right. Yeah.
Doesn't make you one.
Right.
You can go to every CrossFit course, not just CrossFit, and not everyone, because you have to have coaching hours
and
stuff.
You can go and get every credential.
You can get every credential.
You're a good coach.
Never. I was teaching level 1 in Virginia Beach, whenever that was, and the guy was like, "I'm a master's student, and I don't understand what you just did with the squats group." And I'm not saying I'm like, there's Boz and all them. Like, there's plenty of people who run better squats groups, or very good squats groups. I'm not saying I have, like, the best squats group or whatever. And I'm like, okay, yeah. I mean, I'm like watching you move. I'm talking with you. I'm getting to know you, and then we're gonna come up with one thing to get better.
Sure.
And he was like, I know, but I'm like third year master's program or whatever, and we have never done that. And it's like, right, and that's why this course is way better, I'm sorry, than your master's education. Value to it, but for working with somebody on how to do this, anyway.
So so that is the process. So for it is a process. It's interesting because I think people enter into coaching, like, they get a coach, they get a life coach, they get a whatever, and they are very much just looking at, like, this end state, and this person's gonna provide this magic solution. And people do get into it like, oh crap, you mean, like, I have to find the answer. So I, and not to bring it back to the gym, but I think it is something we've been talking about, and it's a objective thing people can kind of conceptualize. One of the things we've been saying, and we kind of reference StrongFit a lot, but a lot of it's because it's like, wow, it just resonates so much. Is like, there's a difference of putting someone in the position and having them just, like, check the box. Like, you got your hips below parallel, you did a squat. Versus them feeling like they're the only one that can know and get into that position. And so when we look at coaches in the CrossFit space or in the fitness space, a lot of it is just consulting. I'm going to tell you what to do.
Yeah.
You just need to do it. I'm going to look at you. It's going to look like you did it. I checked the box and move on. Versus having that relationship where you're getting to know that person. Where are they at? What do they need? What's all about this person? Making it about them and having them be part of it, even in a small thing like a cue, right? So you've said this, like, there's a difference between telling the person, hey, you need to just like do this, and presenting them with this problem like, hey, what do you think would make that feel better? Like, so you're having trouble keeping your heels down or whatever. What do you think you could do that might make it feel like you can get there a little better? Oh, like if I widen my feet, I get there. Like, okay, great. Versus you just saying like, widen your feet.
Yeah.
And I think that's something that, like, you know, is really that skill that, and you do need to, that isn't something that just comes easily to people and to coaching. And it's far easier to just run around telling people what to do. And it doesn't require as much of yourself either. So I think it's just a very,
sorry, go on.
Yeah, the point I'm trying to make is being a really good coach. There's a lot of people out there, even in the mindset space, and that's, you know, more interesting to this conversation. I mean, we know everybody is a mindset coach, is coaching people, is a life coach.
Yeah.
And then when you go and you look at what they're doing, they're not coaching.
No.
They're not establishing a relationship with someone to provide them knowledge, work with them, all the things you said. They're saying, like, do these things.
Yeah.
And that's going to help you. Now, there's nothing, we're not saying that, we're not judging that, like, hey, that doesn't have any value. That's wrong. Like, put all that stuff away. Like, that information is trash. But that's not a coach.
No.
And it's sort of misleading, and people who are leaning on maybe their experiences. So if I'm saying I'm a whatever, I don't have that many accolades, but if I'm saying I'm a 10-year affiliate owner and I'm going to lean on that and I'm going to put that out there, and that's going to be my thing to kind of just have people look at it and be like, oh, okay, like, yeah, I want to work with this person. But as you said, I'm not really working with people individually to help them. I'm just kind of throwing it up there and being like, look at what I did.
Yeah, you're resting on your laurels.
Sort of template, yeah.
Yeah, but the thing is that there's a dichotomy there, because you need to bring your 11 years of affiliate ownership to the coaching relationship.
Sure, that's
so like,
that's not useless, but it's just what you do with it.
It's what you do with it, but it's also it's how you use it to make it digestible and actionable and meaningful for that person. And it's not just, hey, do this.
Sure.
Because they might also come to you and try to wiggle you into a corner where you just say, okay, fine, do this.
Yeah.
And you gotta be, it's kind of like a dance, and you really do have to have that. When does this person need to lead it, and when do I need to lead it? You never know. We've never. I'm a phenomenal dancer.
So bad.
Are you kidding? The push up and the stay away.
We'll save that for another podcast.
But the key is that, yeah. So if we go back to the mindset space, like, I find it ironic that everybody's a fucking mindset coach, but nobody can define mindset,
well,
or has taken a stab at it. Like, what does it mean? Thinking more? What about emotions?
Well, or not quitting, or being positive, or
okay, all of that stuff. But anyway, I think the key is, and then when it comes to, there was one thing though, I just think about the CrossFit thing, and the coaches, because we were talking about the gym. Yeah, like where we're at too, and I think we touched upon this last week, is like, we've also promoted what we thought was a effective means of coaching. And develop that, when what we were really doing was more consulting with coaches. Yeah. So like, just saying, and I remember my first level 1 having this conversation with Pat Barber about the dip in the push jerk or the push press. Yeah. And because the manual, and it's in bold, says hips back and down. And it's just like, yeah, but back, like, there's like understanding what happens as a result. And then like that being different from like what we wanted, you know, and so really looking at, we're telling people like what to do, but that's not getting them the results. Like that's like, it looks like it's better, but if I ask the person where you feel it and they still say their quads, there's a problem.
Right, that's what we're saying. It's just checking a box.
And so some of it is like, going around and telling people, okay, knees out, heels down, chest up, blah, blah, blah. Fine. The swing to the other side of saying, hey, we're going to need to work with each other one-on-one, 3 hours a day for 1 year, and then we can release you. Like, no, that's not it.
Yeah,
either.
I think it's an overtime. It's also, there's a lot there, and I think there's a whole conversation that we could go into about coaching.
Yeah, maybe we do that next week.
Yeah, and I think though, to come back to that, I think it's an interesting thing to look at personally, or maybe like where we're at now, leaving it with what are some things that we're looking to. So like for me, the old guard, like when I have looked at that and identified with it, like what does that mean for me? What are some action steps for me to become the student? What do I need to do to become the student of it? And so yeah, that looks to me like not just
what does that look like?
Yeah, like I like how you said like it doesn't mean apply less, like do less, because
the old guard has 90% application.
Yeah.
7 out of 8 slices are application.
Sure.
Which is already known, like not in the past, and 1 slice is acquisition or learning more.
And I think that's something that I have. If I look at my little slice, it's definitely gotten bigger this last year. I think I've been looking at that. And as we've talked about with even just applying it to my own fitness and being willing to sort of like, okay, I'm ready now to like start making that slice bigger. So I think continuing with that, and that some of the action steps probably look like, what's funny about that is it starts to peel back other things. So if I'm interested in acquiring more, I need to make the time and space to acquire more. Because it's not just like, well, now I just need to acquire more. Well, okay, if that means for me in terms of what I'm doing in my life, a little more research, a little more reading, and there's already like my days are packed, what has to go? Where do I need to make some adjustments to make the time and space to acquire? Does that make sense? So it's definitely pulls on some other strings, not just, okay, good, I'm just going to take this course.
Yeah. What's interesting about that, and I hope this is on par with it, but the way I kind of see it is like you can swap the pie charts, but not change the identity.
Right.
And so if you're the old guard and you're like, okay, students take tests, because I say that, students take tests, and all you fucking do is take tests and you don't actually go to class,
sure,
you're not a student.
Yeah.
You're just taking tests.
Yeah.
And what's funny about that is like, and Julian and Richard and Kyla and the Strongfoot folks, Tyler, they talk about that with, and Andrew with like the conditioning in the building.
Right.
And
not
it's like,
just
yes, finally,
taking
thank you.
test.
Not just every day is taking a test. Like, what does going to class look like? And I was talking to Olivia this morning at breakfast, and we were asking about Spanish.
All her grades. And
well, yeah.
Like, are you actually learning?
Do you understand why
you
got the 98, or why you didn't get the other question? Because like, great, you got 98, but like that 2% that you didn't get right, that's then where you're gonna have real learning. Spanish. I'm like, do you have a lot of quizzes in Spanish? She's like, yeah, about once a week. I'm like, I guess that makes sense, right? It's a foreign language. If they just peppered them with quizzes, do you learn? Did you learn? Did you learn? Did you learn? Did you learn? Like, you have to go to class. And you have to learn, okay, this is the word. This is the conjugation. This is the funny shape I need to make my mouth. And that was the same thing with Arabic. Right. When I was learning Arabic, it was 6 hours a day. And we would have tests every now and then, but like, it didn't, I don't even remember what it was like. But to transition from the old guard and to become the student, understanding that yes, students go to class, they attend lectures, they study, they research on their own, they make note cards, they do whatever,
and they take a test to see where
to see where they're at, as like really an expression and a celebration of that. And so that is it. It's not just it's not a math problem. Right. So you're becoming that person. Yes. That's similar to like the thing like a Green Beret in this situation would fucking wake up earlier, right, to make sure I reviewed my gear, because I'm not good at this, because
you have to practice it.
Yeah. And so like that's what they do. They don't say, hey, by the way, have your stuff ready in 3 minutes. 70-pound rucksack, me us out on the snow. It's like, oh God. It's like, well, the ruck was packed already because the Green Beret would have their ruck packed and stuff. So.
Yeah, and I think it's interesting to say like, well, what, and also like, what am I focusing on? So if you're being a Green Beret, you want to be a Green Beret. Like, what is that I want to do? What am I applying that to? I do think it's worth saying, like, it's not always, and I wrote about this yesterday. You're not in a vacuum, so there's other people in your life, in your business, in your whatever, that might not love, for example, if you're the old guard, like, yeah, I'm going to acquire some new information, I'm going to start applying it. It's like, wait, like,
yeah.
But that's not who you've been, that's not what we've done.
Yeah.
So kind of knowing, like, you have to really, to go back to a couple of podcasts ago, you have to have that belief and knowing, like, okay, I really have this belief, and currently, I'm speaking personally, I do have that belief. I do feel a little stuck because of having the old guard mentality, and I maybe have been holding back from acquiring and applying new stuff because what will happen? What will happen if I do that? So also identifying, like, why maybe you're hesitant to do those things. So it is more complicated, and it's
for sure.
And that's where having a coach, and you certainly, although my husband as well, like, you do.
It's tough though. That's a tough one. That's like one of the hardest things, and we've talked about that recently. Like, when to wear the hat of husband, when to wear the hat of coach,
which is another podcast.
But I think that the point you brought up about, you're not just in a vacuum, or like, okay, cool, like, I'm listening to this, I'm in my car, I'm like up and downing my head, like fired up. Then you get to work and it's like, oh, slap of reality in the face.
People are like, no, we don't do that this way. This is how we've done it.
And that's the thing.
Take your ideas and go away.
Yeah, and that's the thing with disruption, though.
Right.
And it is the reason for maintaining the old guard sometimes is not because you don't want to be the student.
Right.
It's because the disruption, the risk of disruption, the fallout, the collateral damage, whatever you want to call it,
is such a big pressure that you feel like you can't.
Big pressure and a constraint and a restriction that possibly at that time, you're right. You might have to continue to be the old guard a little bit, but then you have to kind of look at, okay, what's the plan? Because
I recently was talking to someone who worked as a aerobics instructor for me like 14 years ago at the Y.
Yeah.
When I worked at the Y.
Yeah.
I was the wellness director. I was in charge of the PT stuff and the aerobics. And it was so, like, antiquated at the time.
Right.
And so I brought in, like, a couple of things that were definitely not, the old guard was not happy about it. It was like, no, this is what we do.
Yeah.
What is this? This is, like, crazy, like TRX, that kind of stuff. Like, what is this? Like, we don't
Swinging
do that.
from straps.
We don't do that. What's funny is it did finally integrate. Imagine. Since then, they have not acquired, I don't think, anything since I left. So but now anyway, it's just funny. She was like, that was so great. But anyway,
and that's what I wrote in the write up, and I guess I'll try to put the write ups up. But go on Between the Ears Instagram, the write ups are on there. It's a little swipe thing. Institutions, long-standing institutions, are generally the old guard. Yeah. Like, yours was the Y, mine was the United States Army.
Yeah.
Special forces. Even within that, it's like, dude, we invaded and destroyed the Taliban in Afghanistan in 3 weeks without doing like cleans and kettlebell swings and putting like we just rucked and drank beer. It's like, yeah, okay,
sure.
That's not what we're saying though. Like, you did that.
Surely there's always, like, and that's what we've been using the word evolution. Like, if we all imagine, like, yes, like, learning is good for us. Not like when you really, I keep like coming this expression, like, learning is life. Like, yeah, like, how boring or how stale or how stagnant or how just if you just know it all, if you reach the end. And that's really kind of where a lot of people get to, and there's fear and whatever, all kinds of things wrapped up in it. But, like, we do look at not being good at something or failing at something as, like, a negative. But really, as you said, like, it is the opportunity to learn. It's the opportunity to
and there's actually in the BTE practice, there's like 1.0 and a 2.0. And
2.0 is not yet released.
2.0 is not yet released. It's currently being so in the 2.0, which is new,
it'll be new next year.
Whole new set of mindsets, whole new workouts, even more like I've got some good additions to it. And it's only for people who have done 1.0.
Sure.
So, that's a big one. And I'm really like, I hope I'm not being the hoarder right now.
I'm trying to help you with
but
hoarding.
You're trying to help me with hoarding, but it's also something that I think that there's also some element of timing, and we talk about this too.
Yeah, there's an appropriate amount of not just throwing everything out there.
Yeah, because also like, okay, I want there to be, in my experience and for what I think, like a foundational sort of like, okay, got it, and then some of the higher level stuff, I think is like that's what I'm fired up for, and I'm actually like really having to restrain myself because I do want to share it with the world, because like when I was talking to James Victoria, and he was like, look, dude, the world needs more Bill. And I'm like, ugh, like even right now saying that, it's just like, And to the picture I put up about with John photographed, I like, that's right. And so I do want to teach, I do want to share, I do want to coach, because I know that the skill set I have, the experiences I have, and the passion and the care and the ability to change lives for the better is there. And it's selfish to not step into that and to not embrace that and to not live that because it's uncomfortable for me. It's not about me, and I need to, I think, do a better job at that. So, all that to say, if you do want to do coaching, there's different ways of doing it. One-on-one, you can certainly do that. I think one of the most powerful ways is to do it in conjunction with the practice, because that's you're being a student.
And the practice, just for people to, if they have not joined the practice, at this point, they can sign up as an individual, or you would recommend they wait till January?
They can sign up as an individual. So if you don't if you don't want any coaching, if you just want the workouts, the mindsets, and the awareness piece, and you don't want and doing it on your own and not talking to me, that's fine.
You can go on and do that.
You can go on and do that. If you don't care about the group element, you can go on and do that. I think you're selling yourself short, but I understand that some people are like, hey, you know what? Nope, I'm just, if you are truly a lone wolf and you don't really care about anything else, fine. We're different there, but I understand that might be good for you. That might be what you need right now too.
The other option.
The other option is January 1st or January 3rd. The next class is going to go on.
And that involves, you're in a community, people are posting, people share their thoughts, there are some calls.
There's calls.
So you're commenting, you're responding to everybody's comments. So there's your coaching, but also what we know is really powerful is the community piece. And I found for myself, it's interesting, like there's an accountability too with the group. I feel accountable to share and to keep going because of the group. Yeah. If it was just me, that's we have that program, Train With Us, at the gym, and when a couple of us wanted to run a marathon, and it really started from like I knew it would happen if we did it as a group. Yeah. So there is that element where sometimes you struggle to be accountable to yourself, but you'll be accountable to the group.
And the thing I think that's important to understand too is like you don't have to post. There's people that will never post, and that is okay. That's okay. That's as long as they're doing what they feel is best for them, or is whatever. I would encourage them. Hey, just put something up there once. Yeah. No one's gonna like bite your fingers off.
Right, just have that experience, that little uncomfortable experience.
Just have it, because that's part of the whole experience. But if they're like, hey, look, like, you know what? I think this is like seriously, like this is where I'm at right now. That's fine. You can still read other people. So like, there's no pressure. There's no minimums there.
So that's.
And then there's the one-on-one route where it's not just buying it and doing it. It's we're gonna work together, and that is now one of those things where it's like, yes, you need to put the work in, and
it's a lot of work. but it's arguably, and I was just thinking about this with your coaching, like I am the kind of person that defaults to, I just want you to tell me the answer.
Yeah.
And I think about how much you're coaching in the last year, and obviously having the benefit of one-on-one outside of the practice, just like really whatever's coming up, like, hey, like you're gonna coach me. It's been really hard. It's a lot of work, but it's been like incredibly valuable. It's the most I think I've actually become the person I want to become, more of that person than just like going through the motions or acting that, just I'm checking boxes. And so I think just like anything, like there's a lot of work involved. But when people say, well, what is it like what do you do? Like, yeah, you have to work on yourself. Well, what's that? What do you do? And that's where you come in to present. Like, it's not the same for every person. Like what you've done with me or how we've worked through things, that's not just like a template you take and you stick on someone else. No. I mean, what are you working on? What do you want? What's challenging for you right now? And I think that's where I really think it is when you say like that's a skill, that's a talent. Like I think I feel like I'm a good coach in the fitness space. Mm-hmm. And when we talk about like what that is, like connecting with people, meeting them where they're at, sharing their wins, having them come, like I feel like that's something I have a talent in. I am not a coach in the sense you are. And I think that's where like when you experience someone who is a really great coach, and that is a special skill set. It's not just I took a course, I read this book on coaching, and now I'm just gonna do that. There's an inherent like intuition. There's a ton of like knowledge you have to have, an ability to present different ways and methods and questions, and like that's not just something you just pick up a book and like you take a test and now I'm a life coach. So no. I think that's really impressive.
Thanks. Thank you. One of the things, there's a lot of coaching things, and it's like they all boil it down, or not all of them, but a lot of them finally get to the point where it's like, and now I call bullshit. And it's the assessment. Mm-hmm. It's the fucking test. And they'll package it and frame it, be like, oh, look, this can change. It's not just a personality test, Myers-Briggs or Briggs-Myers or whatever it is, like, that's you. I'm this, like the red,
and blue.
I'm red and blue, and that's it. And it's like, okay, so then you're a Rubik's Cube. Then you're a block. Yeah. You're a Lego, is what you're telling me then. Right. And then you don't change. Other ones, it's like, no, it can change.
And
it's like,
make it a template,
but then because you sell that. Yeah. There is no template. There is no formula. My buddies at Uncanny love the thing like burn the script. Mm-hmm. There's no script. One of my clients, previously, she recently told me a story she had with her coworker, and she was like, I was working with this coach, got a lot of progress. He was a Green Beret, whatever, and it wasn't what I expected. And I guess the person was like, well, what did you expect? Like, kind of like, I'm sure it was going to be like crazy intense, like Jocko Willink or David Goggins or Seal Fit. And she's like, we sat down, we met, we chatted. It was like a nice chat and great conversation. And then at our next session, he hands me a fucking gratitude journal. And I'm like, what? This is like not the intense in your face kind of a thing. And I like that because like at that time given what I was hearing and resonating with and picking up, like, hey, a little bit of gratitude with yourself could, I think, be helpful or beneficial. Take that to practice gratitude, universal application.
Well, or everybody that you meet with. Yeah, I was coached by Bill. Like, he gave me a gratitude journal. That's what I do. Bill's coaching is he gives people a gratitude journal. It's like, no,
there's some people and
they might need something else. So yes, I think it's valuable to maybe have a whole other podcast that focuses on.
Isn't that what we did?
Some coaching.
Just now?
No, but anyway.
What we should do is we should kidnap somebody. We should bag them. right?
You want so
I s-
badly to put a bag over someone's head.
A hood.
A hood.
More, you know,
Bill wanted
burlap
to
sack.
put bags over people's head for one of his events, and I said, no, you will be arrested. That
Well,
would not
either
work.
way, and then get them in, sit them down, and we should do a live coaching session. If you're interested in calling in, how about that? If you're interested in calling in,
I think the part that might be missing there that you probably said is like, I don't know that they put their hand up and said like, I'm invested in this. If we kidnap them.
well, maybe if we said, put your hands up.
Maybe we get a bunch of people to write in and say, I'm interested in coaching. Now they don't know if we're gonna roll them up Fight Club style when they
here's
go
the thing,
into their place of work and kidnap
Here's
them.
the thing, you got to hit hard and fast. Here's the thing though with that, it's not a fucking Tony Robbins thing. It's not a circus trick. It's not a saw the person in half and put them back together. That would be cool. The first coaching session, if somebody called in like, hey, coach me, it would probably be underwhelming.
Sure.
Because it's like, let's talk.
Right.
And we need to have this happen. So I guess that's the whole point too, and that's where what I will put up more about too is essence versus form. Mm-hmm. And we have to focus on the essence.
Okay, and I think that is now opening up because it's like,
I'm not going to go into that right now, but what I'm saying is if it was like, oh, I want to watch you work or whatever, like in this weird way, and I'm not saying people are thinking that, but if we kind of make it up to be a spectacle,
let me see what it
like,
is.
oh, let me see you. It's like, we're not going to float. We're not going to levitate. Yeah. Somebody isn't, you know what I mean? So it is a process, and it is not a short-term thing. It is not a one-time fix. Yeah. And so if you were to see an initial coaching session, it would be underwhelming to you because it would be like, okay, I'm watching two people talk. And that's and that's like, honest to God. If you're wanting a coach, and you are also, if you're working with a coach or whatever, and it's just like, oh man, like, I don't know, dude, relax. Mm-hmm. Like, understand the long haul. We need to establish rapport and get to know you. That way we can do our job. So that's all we got. We're an hour and 15 in-ish.
All right.
A couple things coming up. January 1st, practice 1.2. So second phase, second class rather. Second group. Possibly a daytime evolution.
Before the end of the year.
And possibly a seminar.
Yeah.
Workshop. Evolution, expect to be doing something involving your body. Like, you're going to be doing that quite a bit. It's going to challenge you. It's going to have a bunch of things. Workshop, seminar, will move, but that's not the emphasis. Yeah. Like, it's going to be much more of a teaching environment, but super interactive, which is kind of cool. So if those things are interesting, and if there is like a time, because I'm like kicking around a couple ideas, please provide feedback. Let me know, hey, you're interested in that? When would maybe be a good time? Because like the people that are also like, hey, February, I'd be down for a seminar. Can't do it before the year. Like, okay, then we'll look to schedule at that. So I'm asking for your help to get a better idea rather than just closing my eyes and throwing darts on the board and saying, okay, we're going to do it here. So I'd like to crowdsource that a bit. So
great.
Yeah. All right. Till next time.
Bye.
Bye.
I have to go. My mom